Hey Raffalitos! Today we're on Main Street in Georgetown. So that's Main Street. We're on the center section of the avenue. What I want to talk to you today about is the currency exchange rate of the Guyana dollar. Now, I mentioned in a previous video how the government released a green paper on this establishment of a sovereign wealth fund. Part of the paper, this green paper, describes how the government will handle the influx of US dollars from the sale of oil. Now, there is now a date for the start of production, oil production, and that is March 1st, 2020. So 2020, March 1st, 2020 is going to be the first day for production of oil in Guyana. And what's going to happen eventually is there's going to be a lot of US dollars flowing into the economy. Now, the natural impact of an influx of US dollars into the Guyana economy would be to cause the Guyana dollar to rise in value. That would be the natural impact. But the Guyana government has decided beforehand, before any of this starts to happen, to restrict the amount of US dollars entering the economy. And the reason why they give is they would like to keep the value of the Guyana dollar low so that it will remain competitive. That is, so that Guyanese items produced in Guyana, Guyanese products will be competitive on the world market. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I disagree with that. 3 reasons why I think the Guyana dollar should be allowed to rise in value once oil production begins. Now, here is a graph showing the exchange rate for the Guyana dollar from 1955, from the 1950s all the way to 2017, 2018. And what you will see is that for most of that time, up until 1980, the value of the Guyana dollar was equivalent to the value of the US dollar. So the exchange rate was 1-to-1 US to Guyana dollar well into the mid-70s. In 1980, the value started to creep up, and then you can see that by 1985 there was a major devaluation. 1990-91 there was also a major devaluation. And now the value of the Guyana dollar sits at 210 Guyana dollars to 1 US dollar. The problem with that is that the government has essentially allowed the value of labor, the value of the Guyanese labor and products to devalue, to depreciate. And this is in fact, it has a violent impact on the lives of Guyanese citizens when you devalue the currency, right? So people in Guyana will tell you about inflation, how in fact their salaries didn't change, but the cost of certain items went up dramatically to compensate for the devaluation of the dollar. And now when it comes time for the reverse to happen, that is, for the value of the Guyana dollar to reappreciate, to go back to where it was, perhaps equivalent to the US dollar, the government has decided not to allow the dollar to appreciate. And the way they decide to do that is that they're going to bank the US dollars, they're going to put the US dollars into a bank account, and they're going to restrict the amount of US dollars that are released into the economy, say via contract. So they're not going to offer as many contracts to businesses in Guyana, say for repair of roads or building bridges or building infrastructure, because they claim that there is not a capacity, that the Guyanese economy does not have the capacity to absorb the amount of money that will be flowing into the economy. And here's why I disagree with that. The number one reason why I disagree with that is that most of Guyanese business, international business, is already done in US dollars. So all of the companies that sell products abroad, say if your company sells chow mein or curry powder or whatever product you manufacture in Guyana, when you sell that in the US market, you are actually selling it in US dollars. It's priced in US dollars. So changing the value, allowing the Guyana dollar to appreciate, will not change the cost of items that you sell in other countries, because those items are already priced in US dollars. So by not allowing the Guyana dollar to appreciate in value, this will have no impact on the sale of goods from Guyana. The most impact it will have is on the lives of Guyanese at home, who are not allowed to regain what they lost during the years of depreciation. So I'm going to go over here and pop up a drone. We're now at Burnham Court. This is Burnham Court on Middle Street and Carmichael Street. Across the street is the Promenade Gardens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a drone here and show you a little bit of the city. Yeah, but that's point number one. Point number one is that goods and services marketed internationally are already priced in US dollars. So there will be no impact if the value of the Guyana dollar appreciates. If the value of the Guyana dollar goes up, it will have no impact on the goods that are sold abroad, because those goods are already priced in US dollars. So there's really no reason for the government to prevent the spending of US dollars in the Guyana economy. So here's point number two. Reason why the Guyana dollar should be allowed to appreciate, or should appreciate naturally. So one of the reasons why the Guyana dollar is low, the value of the Guyana dollar is 210 US dollars to 1, is because the demand for the US dollar is high. And there is a greater demand for the US dollar than the supply. So what happens is that there is more Guyana dollars out there seeking US dollars, because businessmen in Guyana need to import items for sale. And because of the trade imbalance, because you're importing a lot of the products that we use in this country are imported from abroad, and those imports are paid for in US dollars, there's a lot of Guyana dollars being spent to acquire US dollars to make these purchases. Now, if the money that is earned from the sale of petroleum, that US dollars, is made available to these businesses that are looking for US dollars to buy, the supply of US dollars will increase dramatically, and therefore it will outpace the demand. In other words, the supply of US dollars will be greater than the demand for Guyana dollars, and therefore the Guyana dollar will naturally rise in value, because there are more US dollars available than Guyana dollars. The supply is greater than the demand. So that's one of the natural ways in which the Guyana dollar will appreciate. And my guess is that within 5 years of oil production, the Guyana dollar, if it is allowed to appreciate naturally, will rise to near 50 Guyana dollars to $1. I'm going to give my reasons for that later. But it could eventually and quite conceivably get back to a situation where the Guyana dollar is equivalent to the US dollar, simply because there will be a surplus of US dollars on the Guyana market because of the sale of oil. And that's the reason number two why the Guyana dollar should appreciate and should be allowed to appreciate against the US dollars. Let's pop up this drone and then I'm gonna tell you my third reason. So guys, the third reason why it's a bad idea to not allow the Guyana dollar to appreciate is because there's another side to this equation. And that is that the US dollar also fluctuates on the world market. So it's not just the Guyana dollar that is changing in value, it's the US dollar that's changing as well. And the world economy is changing. You know, if there's a change in the price of oil, or a change in government in the US, a change in, you know, market conditions in the US, the value of the US dollar changes. And so by restricting the free market value of the Guyana dollar, you are allowing the Guyana dollar to be artificially low when the value of the US dollar continues to change. And those of you who live in Canada can tell you this, that sometimes the Canadian dollar can rise in value against the US dollar so that the US dollar is actually lower in value, right? That has happened in the last decade where the US dollar depreciated in value to the point where the Canadian dollar was stronger than the US dollar. And the same is true for the European, the euro, and the British pound and so on. So the value of the Guyana dollar must be allowed to appreciate and to behave like every other currency while the US dollar varies in value so that you can have a free market. Anyway, guys, those are my reasons why I think the Guyana dollar should be allowed to appreciate against the US dollar once oil and gas industry starts production in March 2020. And I expect that if it is allowed to appreciate, the Guyana dollar will reach equivalency with the US dollar within 10 years and will probably reach a value of like 50 to 1 within 5 years. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe and tell me what you think about the government's decision to keep the value of the Guyana dollar low. Do you think that the Guyana dollar should be allowed to appreciate so that it's equivalent to the US dollar again? Later!